We began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is Shabbos Parshas Lech Lecha. Parshas Lech Lecha is the Chazarah that talks about Avram Avinu. And it starts off right away, the Rebbe is telling Avram, Lech Lecha, that he should go me'artzecha, u'me'meladetecha, u'me'beis avicha. That he should leave his country, his place of origin, his place of birth, his father's home. And where should he go? He should go ala oretz asher hareka. He should go to the land where the Rebbe will show him. In other words, the Rebbe was sending Avram Avinu to such a place that Avram himself didn't even know where the Rebbe is saying, sending him to. Avram had no idea what the place was, where the place was. What is the Rebbe telling him? Go ala oretz asher hareka. Go to the land which I will show you. And Avram Avinu responded to what the Rebbe told him. He listened to what Hashem told him and he went. And as explained, Chassidus, Sifrei Musa, Chassidus elaborates on it. What's the inyan of Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, me'meladetecha, me'beis avicha? That it means that a person can have, in Yonim, artzecha means things from his own country. What's the pshat, his own country? Things that became part of his nature. In Yonim, which he got involved into doing them and became part of him. And the same when we're talking about Meladetecha, your place of birth, that's also in Yonim, which he has achieved on his own. And then we come to Beis Avicha. Beis Avicha, as Taichin Chassidus is, in Yonim, which a person has achieved through his Moichin. Moichin are called Abba. Chassidus and Kabbalah. So therefore, the Rebbe is telling Avram Avinu how much he has achieved in Artzecha, Meladetecha, Beis Avicha. Now it comes to a point that he's telling him Lech Lecha. He's to go to a higher madrege. And what is this higher madrege? The higher madrege is ala oretz asher hareka. And this ala oretz asher hareka, this is a very unusual high madrege where Avram Avinu is totally dedicating himself to follow what the Rebbe will tell him. He himself is no Metzias, his own being, his own Metzias he's putting totally aside, and he's ready to follow the instruction of the Rebbe to go ala oretz asher hareka. And being as mentioned already many times that this is a year of Tafshin Nun, Teishnas Nisim, as it was accepted by Yidden all over to interpret the meaning of this year, that is Teishnas Nisim. The Rebbe many times when he refers to this inyan, as well as the Rebbe's letters which the Rebbe wrote in the beginning of Tishrei, the Rebbe refers to a Rambam. That the Rambam writes that an inyan that Yidden have accepted upon themselves has a toikef, has a strength of just like a mitzvah. The same thing, when Yidden have accepted upon themselves that this is how they're interpreting the inyan of Tafshin Nun, Teishnas Nisim. So there's a very strong meaning to it. A very strong koiches in the fact that Yidden have accepted this interpretation. Memela, especially when we're talking in a year of Teishnas Nisim, it is definitely so that Yidden are bekoyach to uplift themselves and fulfill this inyan of Lech Lecha and reach to a level of ala oretz asher hareka. And as we find Taka by Avram Avinu was involved in spreading the message of the Rebbe, not only for himself, he reached out to everybody. As we find that even with Lot, Avram utilized his influence on Lot. Though it came to a point where Avram and Lot had to separate, and he told him, you should leave from me. And as Avram gave him the option, and he told him, if you will go right, I will go left. If you will go left, I will go right. But nonetheless, what we see from this is, Avram did not totally divorce himself from him, because between left and right, there is a shaykhis. This is the left side of the person or of an inyan, and this is the right side of an inyan. What did Avram tell him? If you will go left, I will go right. If you will go right, I will go left. But it still means that there is a relation, there's a contact between Avram and Lot. And we see that the influence of Avram went so far on Lot, that even when Lot, after Lot chose to leave Avram Avinu, and Taka left him and he went far away from Avram. And we can see, where did Lot find himself a place to live? Lot chose to live in Stein. So we can already imagine at what level Lot was at. But at the same time, what did Lot do in Stein? Lot in Stein excelled in Achnos HaSochim, which is something which he picked up from Avraham Avinu. Avraham's inyan was Achnos HaSochim. So the influence was felt on Lot as well. That Lot also excelled in Achnos HaSochim, and to such an extent did he excel in Achnos HaSochim that he was a Chmeisel Nefesh. He sacrificed his life for Achnos HaSochim. Which really, if we're talking at it from a halachic standpoint, question arises. We know Al Pi Torah there is only 3 averas where a person is supposed to sacrifice his life: Yehareg, Va'al Yaver. And as far as all other mitzvahs, there's no such thing that a person should put himself into sakoneh because of and go through Yehareg, Va'al Yaver. In fact, it's a shayla and halacha for Yid is allowed to do a thing like that. And especially that it was prior to Matan Torah. Prior to Matan Torah, we b'chlal don't know that of an inyan that there should be an inyan of Mesiras Nefesh prior to Matan Torah, an obligation of Mesiras Nefesh. And nonetheless, Lot was zich Meisel Nefesh for the mitzvah of Achnos HaSoch. Why? So the Rebbe brings out that when one comes to this level of Ela Oretz Asher HaRekah, he's coming to such a high madrege, such a high association with the Rebishter, that he's ready to drop Lech Lecha, Me'aretzecha, Me'maladetecha, Me'beis Avicha. All of this he's ready to drop. Just like we find by Avraham Avinu. When Avraham Avinu was getting this instruction from the Rebishter, Avraham himself was already at a very high madrege. He was 75 years old. After going through the various opinions in Chazal, at what age Avraham recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether at the age of 3 or older. There's an opinion in Chazal that was at the age of 48 that Avraham recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but definitely when Avraham was 75 years old, he was already at a very, very high madrege, to the extent that he definitely realized the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he lived in a madrege of Artzecha, Meladetecha, Mebeis Avicha. He had his accomplishments, his achievements, his avodah, and nonetheless he fulfilled the message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Lech Lecha. And where to did he go? He went reached to the madrege, reached to the level of Ela Oretz Asher HaRekah. So when one comes to this level of Oretz Asher HaRekah, in other words, he puts himself totally aside, and he's following what the Rebishter is telling him at this madrege of Oretz Asher HaRekah, this could also leave room for the inyan of Mesiras Nefesh as well. What's the pshat Mesiras Nefesh? Mesiras Nefesh is the taij that he's putting himself totally aside, and he's dedicated to the Rebishter to such an extent. He's dedicated to the Rebishter to such an extent that he's willing to sacrifice his life. It says, Rebbe brought out in the Farbrengen, before Matan Torah, we know that there was a separation. Chassidus explains at length that there was division between Gashmias and Ruchnias. There was Shamayim Hashem, Va'oretz Nosan L'bnei Yodam. Shamayim reflects Ruchnias, Oretz reflects Gashmias. True. Granted. However, even prior to Matan Torah, as we will soon see by the inyan of Bris Milah, which Avraham did, prior to Matan Torah, when Avraham lived up to this madrege of reaching to the level of Ela Oretz Asher HaRekah, this was such a Mesiras Nefesh to the Eibishter, this was such an Ibegigebenkeit, that as a result, and this had an influence not only on Avraham, but on the people of Avraham as well. So Mamela, it reached out even to Lot, that he had such a level of Mesiras Nefesh that he was ready to sacrifice his life even for the inyan of Achnos HaSoch. Als mitzad his total dedication to the Eibishter. And here we come into the Seder which we're beginning to learn this afternoon. But it was the Seder which we are going into, Parshas Vayera. Parshas Vayera tells us about the Eibishter revealing himself to Avraham Avinu after Avraham Avinu went through the inyan of Milah. So on one hand, Avraham Avinu reached the highest madrege, going through the inyan of Milah, going through the inyan of circumcision. And we all know the famous story of the Rebbe Rashab, when the Rebbe Rashab was a child, a very young child, and he was only learning Chumash at that age. He didn't even learn Gemara yet, or further limudim, and it was in the first weeks of him learning Chumash, because it was Parshas Vayera. When we're up to Parshas Vayera, we're only 3 weeks into Chumash, 4th week of Chumash, and we still have close to 50 Sedras ahead of us to learn on Chumash. And when the Rebbe Rashab was a child, and he learned about the fact that the Rebishter made himself seen to Avraham Avinu, he came to his Zayda, the Tzemach Tzedek, and was crying. Why was it Avraham Avinu that was Zoiche to see the Rebishter, and why is he not Zoiche to see the Rebishter? Today the Rebbe mentioned it.
And his explanation on it goes that really every Yid, being that every Yid is a descendant of Avraham Avinu. Avraham is Avinu, he's our father. And therefore every Yid is a descendant of Avraham Avinu. So every Yid can really have this, reach the level of seeing the Eibishter. At times we may not feel it or see it. As the expression goes in Chazal, Afal Gav di Iu Loi Chaze, even though we don't see it, Mazlayu Chaze, our Mazal can see it. And we find Taka by Avraham Avinu, that Avraham Avinu was Taka in a position that he was a Chayla. When was this? It was the third day of his Mila. And the fact that he was, third day of the Mila, that's the most painful day. That means that after that, that's the day when the Mila has the strongest effect on the person. So being that it is so big Ashmias, it means that the same thing is Beruchnias as well. That Avraham Avinu really reached to the level of having the bris within him. As we know, it's explained in previous sichas from previous years. There's a lengthy explanation on the fact that when Avraham Avinu sent Eliezer on the mission that he should find Shidduch for Yitzchak, Avraham Avinu told him, Simno yotcho tachas yireichi, which means he should put his hand where his bris was. So the question arises, this does not correspond to tznius. When the Gemara says, but various tanoim that never put their hand below their belt. And here we say that when Avraham Avinu wanted to put Eliezer under an oath, what did he tell him? Simno yotcha tachas yireichi. So the Rebbe brings out, and referred to it today as well, and explained in previous Sichas at length. By Yeshua, there is a klal that when we put somebody under oath, we make him hold a chayfet shel mitzvah, an object of a mitzvah. What's the taichin object of a mitzvah? Object of a mitzvah means that it is a gashmiistic object, but this object contains kedusha within it, so it becomes a chayfet shel mitzvah. As we mentioned earlier, prior to Matan Torah, there was no such thing that a gashmiistic item should carry a kedusha, should carry a sanctity in it. Hashamayim shamayim l'Hashem. There was a division between Gashmias and Ruchnias. When was introduced the concept? When was it introduced that into Gashmias can absorb Kedusha? This happened by Matan Torah. As the Rebbe explains at length, this is the whole idea of the Mishkan, that Gashmias, the Kenyanim, are absorbing Ruchnias, are absorbing Kedusha. However, prior to Matan Torah, this was not in existence. Avraham Avinu, all the mitzvahs that he did, he was Mekayim prior to Matan Torah. However, one mitzvah, Avraham, before Matan Torah, did it in the same way as we do it after Matan Torah, and that is mitzvah smila. And that is why, once Avraham did go through circumcision, his milah became a chayfet shel mitzvah. It became a chayfet shel kedusha, and he had no other gashmiistic object which had kedusha, other than yereichi, other than his milah. And that is why when he wanted to put Eliezer under an oath, he had to tell him, Simno yotcha tachas yireichi. Actually, with this, the Rebbe also answers, Gemara tells us that all the others have fulfilled all of the mitzvahs, even prior to Matan Torah. So why did Avraham Avinu wait that the Rebbe should tell him that he should, at the age of 99, he should go through circumcision? All other mitzvahs he fulfilled prior to that. Why did he wait for this mitzvah? And with this in line, the Rebbe explains this as well. Why? Because one mitzvah, Avraham Avinu wanted to do the same way like we do it after Matan Torah. So that is why, just like after Matan Torah, we are mitzvah v'iseh, we are commanded to do the same. Avraham wanted to have one mitzvah which the Rebbe should tell him to do it, just like us. All mitzvahs after Matan Torah, he had this one mitzvah prior to Matan Torah, and it had the same effect like mitzvahs have after Matan Torah, that
into the Geshem, into the Gashmias, Kedusha came into it. So this is the Shleimus which Avram Avinu reached by Mila. And at the same time, he was stuck sick, he was stuck ill. Hagami had a tremendous tainug from the fact that he reached to such Shleimus, to such completeness, when he went through the Indian of Mila. But at the same time, he was stuck sick, because as Mefoshe HaChumash say, that from here we learn the Rebbeinu coming to visit Avraham Avinu. From here we learn the minion of Bikkur Cholim of visiting the sick. It the Chasimin that he had to be sick that the Rebbeinu should visit him. If from here we derive this whole minion of Bikkur Cholim, it the Chasimin that Avraham was Takim Mamish Chayil at the time, and the Rebbeinu came to visit him. At the same time we say the Choros Imay Habris, that who was cutting together with Avraham, the Rebbeinu was cutting with him. When Avraham was Mal Yishmael, Avraham did it on his own. However, Avram, by his bris, he reached to such high madrege that the Rebbeinu helped him. The Choros Imay Habris, the Rebbeinu geschnitten together with him at Abris, and together with it, Avram reached this level, this shleimus, which he reached when he went through the Indian of Mila. This is the Indian of this week's Sedra. The Vayera Elav Hashem, how the Rebbeinu hat sich bewiesen to Avram Avinu, and in essence, the Rebbeinu really makes himself seen to each and every Yid. The only thing, even though we don't feel it, as mentioned earlier, how a Mazel can't see it, how the Rebbeinu is really revealing himself to each and every Yid. As the story goes, that the Tzemach Tzedek, when his grandson, the Rebbe Rashab, asked him this question, how come the Rebbeinu hat sich bewiesen to Avram Avinu and to him not? So the Tzemach Tzedek answered him, as a Yid, a Tzaddik, to 99 years, the age of 99, decides to be Zechmal, then he's worthy that the Rebbe follows the instruction of the Rebbe, then he's worthy that the Rebbe should reveal himself to him. The Rebbe continued in the Farbrengen. We see here, from this incident of the Rebbe making himself seen to Avraham Avinu, from here Chazal derive that G'doila hachnosas oichem yoisa mekabolas pnei hashchina, that to greet guests is greater than greeting the Shechina. How do we learn this? Simple. Because Avraham Avinu was seeing the Eibishter. And the Eibishter saw how bad Avraham felt because of the fact that he wasn't able to entertain guests. So the Eibishter sent him the Malachim that seemed to him like guests, and Avraham Avinu turned away from the Eibishter and turned to the guest. So from here the Gemara derives, Mikan, from here we see the greatness of accepting guests. So the Rebbe asks, we can know this from the act of Avraham Avinu. But how did Avraham know? How did Avram know to leave the Rebbeinu and turn and go ahead and greet the guest? So the Rebbe answered, Avram knew it from the fact that he saw what the Rebbeinu did to him. The Rebbeinu was in the middle of talking to him. And the Rebbeinu realized, the Rebbeinu knew of Avram's love towards guests, Avram's dedication towards greeting people. And the Rebbeinu realized the greatness of Avraham Avinu. The greatness of Avraham Avinu's agmas nefesh, of the fact that he had no guests, so the Rebbeinu led to it, to such circumstances that he sent out malachim that seemed to him like guests. He didn't have Yidden. There were no Yidden at that time. All the guests that he had were Arabs, Arbaim. But still, Avram wanted to take care of them as well. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent him the people. So from this, Avram learned that if the Rebbeinu in the middle of a discussion with him makes cease to it, everything, Avram knows how comes from the Rebbeinu, and the Rebbeinu is leading to it, that there are people coming who Avram should think that they are guests, and he should have to go ahead and greet them. The Rebbeinu led to it. So based on that, Avram knew to turn away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and go ahead and greet the guests, and he learned from the act of Hashem that G'doilach nosas oichem yoisa mekabolas pnei hashchina. This introduction, the Rebbe says that really after the month of Tishrei, we are all guests. Why? Because the month of Tishrei, we were all in the house of Hashem. Now it comes after Tishrei, we're Cheshvan, we're all getting back home, we're getting back to our
regular routine, to our regular day-to-day life, we are like guests. Because we didn't get into it yet. Especially that we really have guests here. It was a group of people that came as guests. So it's avada, we have to extend proper reception to them by giving them to say L'chaim and saying L'chaim together with them. L'chaim Tevim L'shalom. L'chaim with all the good wishes, Neshama Beguf, and all other good wishes. Together with the guests that have came here to spend Shabbos here with us. And this will lead to it, this will lead to it that all of us will be able to greet the guest whom we are all so anxious to greet, and that is Mashiach Tzidkenu, who is the guest that everybody is anxious to see and greet. And then we will all go together with Mashiach to the Beis HaMikdash, because every Yid really has a Shaychus to Eretz Yisrael. It's brought out in Sfarim that every Yid has an Amma, piece of land in Eretz Yisrael, or some claim even Dalet Amos in Eretz Yisrael. The Yid Rebbe says, what's the Indian of an Amma? Amma is a size. Gemara, it's mentioned Amma, it's a measurement of land. But the Amma abbreviates Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. Means it's mitzad the fact that we are verbunden with Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. This verbinds us also with Eretz Yisrael, and that is why every Yid has an Amma in Eretz Yisrael. And what we are waiting for is that we all reach Eretz Yisrael, and there we will hear Torah from Mashiach, which will be coming from the Lishkas Hagozes in the Beis HaMikdash to each and every one of us. Now the Rebbe is continuing that last Shabbos
spoke about the concept of Vayakel Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu would congregate Yidden on Shabbos and learn with them and teach them Torah. And the Rebbe elaborated very strongly last week that this is something very advisable to introduce now as well, that Yidden should get together on Shabbos to learn Torah. As the Rebbe said, just like Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah, when Moshe learned Torah, he definitely revealed tremendous inyanim to the Yidden. He learned Torah with all of Klal Yisrael, not only with the 600,000 Yidden from age 20 to 60. Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah with Yidden that are younger. Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah with the older. Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah with the women as well. So Moshe was teaching Torah to Klal Yisrael. And as the Medrash tells us that this was something which was introduced by Moshe and was carried on in later generations, carried on in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. And here the Rebbe came out very strongly last week that it's worthwhile to introduce this inyan again. And this is something that spending the Shabbos properly gives us koyach to be able to hold out the entire week and go through the avodah of the entire week. And today the Rebbe referred to it again and added on that it would be extremely advisable, naturally, that all the places have their shiurim, Nahara, or Pashtei. In other words, every river, every group, every community has their inyanim, what they are into learning Torah. However, it would be extremely advisable to see to it that part of the shiurim of Shabbos, would it even be a smaller portion of the time, a few minutes at a time, but at least the inyan should be there, that on Shabbos we should learn an inyan that has a shaychus to Parshas HaShavua. And Parshas HaShavua, the Seder of the week, or a lot of times even a yontif that comes out during that week, or even that day should be a yontif. The Shabbos could be a yontif as well. To learn an inyan that has a shaychus to the yontif, or an inyan that has a shaychus to the parsha, as we see, as far as shiur chitas are concerned, that when the chitas that comes out on a Shabbos, when the Shabbos is a yontif, we still learn the chitas of the parsha of the week. See to it that to utilize it to relate to inyanim of Parshas HaShavua, and especially now that we are in an era of Afatzas HaMayonis Chutza, so there's the way Chassidus enlightens and explains Parshas HaShavua, and there are many Mamorim Chassidus that have a shaychus to Parshas HaShavua. The Rebbe mentioned that there is the Eira Torah from the Tzemach Tzedek, which goes on Parshas HaShavua, and we have many psukim in every Sedra, even at the beginning of the Sedra, the first pasuk of the Sedra, where we have inyanim Chassidus that relate to Parshas HaShavua. Now the Rebbe says that this same also would be advisable for institutions, Moistos HaTorah, Yeshivas, Chadarim, and Talmud Torahs, that they too should introduce that at a certain time of the week, preferably at the end of the week, but at any time to learn in Yonim that have a shaykhs to Pashas HaShavua. When we're learning in Yonim that have a shaykhs to Pashas HaShavua, the Rebbe says it's also advisable to remind about the importance of giving tzedakah b'chlal, and especially giving tzedakah on an Erev Shabbos. So it would be advisable to see to it that in the meistos, in the institutions, the schools, and Chazarah, children should be trained to give tzedakah on Erev Shabbos, together with the fact of learning the Inyan of Pashas HaShavua. Here talking about the greatness of tzedakah, the Rebbe says that the Inyan of tzedakah is something that has a shaykhus to goyim as well. Tzedakah is not only something which Yidden give, we see it, and especially as we see in the country here that we are living, how this country is excelling in tzedakah. So talking about the Inyan of tzedakah, it is also an Indian that has a shaykhus to goyim as well. So to see to it that goyim should also be trained and bring into them the concept of seeing to it that children as well as adults are trained for the Indian of the Sinas HaTzedakah.
The Rebbe knew how he felt bad at the fact that he had no guests for a few days because he didn't feel well. And here the Rebbe sends him a guest. So he turns around and he sees wer hat ihm geschickt, the guest. He knew it's coming from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe knew of Avrom's dedication to Achnos HaSochem. So the Rebbe knew that what will happen, that Avrom would like turn off to them and take care of them and entertain them. So he learned from the act of Hashem that G'doi Achnos HaSochem Yosem Mekabelos Pnei Yeshkin. From the mere fact that in the middle of his conversation with the Rebbe came to visit him. The Rebbe came to Rashi says it right away at the beginning of the Seder. And nonetheless, the Rebbe at the same time is leading to it that guests should come. So the Rebbe should have gewusst what Avram is going to do. Is that he learned from the act of Hashem that G'dol Achnos HaSochem Yosem Mekabelos Pnei Yeshkin. That's what I understand correctly. That's what the Rebbe said it.
There's anything said, Avram waited 99 years to maul himself. Did he ever question the Eibusher if the Eibusher was ever going to give him that mitzvah? And the pain that he had that he couldn't have that mitzvah. He waited 99 years.
This is a sikh in the very first volumes of Likutei Sichos. As I said, the Rebbe referred to it today again. But it seems like Avram wanted one mitzvah in the way of after Matan Torah. He wanted to have a taste of Matan Torah. So the Rebbe gave him this one mitzvah. He had to wait for it. So he waited. He was anxiously waiting.
Imagine that.
Chazal say, they did all of Torah until it was given, even in Yonim, which came the Rabbanan, even Erev Tafshil, and even things which came later years. So Chachamim were masakin. But this one thing he wanted to do in a taste of Erev Matan Torah. Okay, I go to the